Yeah, so we'll start with just like introducing ourselves. So Lily, if you want to start with introducing yourself.
Hi, I'm Lily, she, her pronouns. I'm in my 4th year studying environmental studies, and I'm also an intern at the Office of Sustainability.
Yeah, and I'm Noelle Muzzy. I'm a 3rd year student studying environmental science and Spanish, and I'm also an intern at the Office of Sustainability. So thank you all for joining us for our first kind of like Zoom webinar on sustainability careers.
Oh yeah, thank you. So most of us are in Morris, which is located on the traditional homeland of the Dakota and Ojibwe people. As Noel said, this is our first in a series of careers in sustainability. So we're starting off with agriculture. Hopefully we'll have many more to come.
Yeah, so tonight we have joining us, we have 3 alums that are now focused in food systems and agriculture. So we have Natalie Hoidal, class of 2015, a UMN Extension Educator. Heidi Eger, class of 2014. Heidi runs Radicle Heart Farm, a 100% grass-fed sheep farm in Southeast Minnesota, and works for a clean energy nonprofit, Winneshiek Energy District. And last but not least, Kirsten Sharpe, class of 2014, and a current dairy research scientist. So to kind of kick things off today and like hear from our panelists, the first thing we want to know is, could you guys kind of introduce yourselves, say who you are, and what kind of sustainability work are you currently doing? So Natalie, if you'd like to introduce yourself first.
Sure. Hi everyone, I'm Natalie. I guess the main sustainability work that I do is through my job at Extension. I work statewide as a local foods and vegetable crops educator. So my role is to work with farmers all across the state. We have about 3,000 vegetable farmers in Minnesota on pretty much everything. So it's a lot of like people calling me when they have problems, and we troubleshoot and figure it out together. I have like an applied research program doing things like nutrient management, disease management, working with non-Eurocentric crops, trying to figure out better recommendations for those in Minnesota. Yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. Heidi, do you want to go next?
My name is Heidi Eger, or Eger, I don't care which. My pronouns are she, her, and I am going to my 4th season of having my own flock of sheep. I live in Southeast Minnesota, 30 minutes south of Preston, if people know where that is. And then I work 3 days a week at an energy nonprofit in Decorah, Iowa, managing a team of AmeriCorps members, doing communications and fundraising.
Hi everyone, I'm Kirsten Sharpe. My married name is Kirsten Moser. I'm currently still living in Morris. I graduated from UMM in 2014 and still here. I'm working at the West Central Research and Outreach Center, which is located by the wind turbines. It's a research center that's affiliated with the U of M CFAN, so down in St. Paul. I have a husband, Jake, and he farms with his dad. They farm corn, soybeans, edible beans, so black beans and kidney beans, and also raise some beef cows. So for sustainability work, I kind of focus in the dairy department at the West Central Research and Outreach Center. And we do a wide variety of work. We're looking at energy usage in commercial dairy farms, energy usage in commercial swine farms. We also have a 30 kilowatt solar system installed in one of our pastures. And I did a study for my master's degree looking at shading cows using solar panels. So that was kind of a big project that I worked on. And currently we're researching alternative calf housing systems, sustainable grazing systems, and we're actually planning on installing another large solar system in our pastures to shade more cows. So kind of a wide variety.
Okay, thank you for introducing yourselves. Since you're all Morris graduates, can you share a little bit about your experience in Morris? So anything from student leadership opportunities or your coursework or employment. Oh, Kirsten, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I really enjoyed my time at Morris as an undergrad. I'm from Bemidji, Minnesota, so kind of used to a smaller town. Bemidji is quite a bit bigger, but smaller on the whole scale of things. And I found that in Morris, so I was able to build a lot of connections in Morris just because of the small campus size, and I really enjoyed that. I started out as being pre-med actually, and then kind of decided I wanted to do something more along the natural resources or environmental route. So I switched my major during my junior year to environmental studies. One of the big reasons I became interested in sustainability, kind of more environmental issues, is because I was basically raised out in the boonies in Bemidji in the woods, and I've just kind of always grown up in nature, and I've enjoyed it, and I've always wanted to preserve what we have. I also took environmental problems and policy with Ed Brands and ecology with Pete Wyckoff, who isn't there anymore. But these two classes have basically, or did basically shape kind of my knowledge about sustainability and issues that we see on a day-to-day basis, climate issues, and really piqued my interest in those problems that we're facing today. I learned a lot from those classes. Those are my top two classes I would recommend anyone to take. So, yeah.
I'm going to assume we're going in reverse order, so I'm going to just jump in. So I would agree that the small campus size at Morris was really great and led to lots of opportunities. I got to work at the Office of Sustainability with Troy, which was just great and really shaped how I think about community work and just approaching all sorts of projects. You know, what's the 50,000 foot view of this project? What's the 10,000 foot view of this project? And my AmeriCorps members all get the you know, when you're working with community members, the first step of any project is relationship building and assessment. So both of those, working at the Office of Sustainability was really great. I also got to work with the Student Organic Garden for 2 years as an undergrad and then for a year as an AmeriCorps member, which was sort of my first entry into the food world. When I got to Morris, I thought that I wanted to do mechanical engineering and I wanted to work on designing more efficient wind turbines. But I also thought I was an introvert. And then I got to college and was like, oh no, I'm not an introvert. I want to work with people, and easier to explain why a homegrown or locally grown tomato is better in all of the different facets than a shipped from wherever tomato at the grocery store than it is to explain energy to people. So I took a detour into ag. I'm still in ag, and I'm also now back in the energy world and have been since. Time is weird now. Since right before COVID hit, it was when I started my new job. Did that answer all the questions? Sort of. Okay, great. Go ahead, Natalie.
All right. So yeah, I also had a great time at Morris for similar reasons. Similar to what Kirsten said, I kind of grew up in the woods and knew that drew me to biology. So I started as a biology major. Originally thought I was going to be an aquatic ecologist. So I did some diatom stuff for a while. And then through my time with the Junior Organic Garden, that Heidi was, I think you were like the president when I first started. So through my time there, like I found a lot of community in that space and really loved being there. And then actually ended up working with Sherry, who's not on the screen here, but is on this call, with seeds and seed sovereignty. And it was through her that I went to the Prairie Festival with a cohort of Morris students. And that's kind of what made me start to think about shifting. I was in this sort of depressed space thinking about like water quality and dedicating my life to water quality. And it felt like working in ag was maybe a way to approach it from like kind of a solutions perspective. So yeah, I guess in addition to that, I worked with MPERG, which doesn't exist anymore, but that was kind of a student activism organization, and the James Adams Project. Became really interested in the connections between immigration and our food system. And also got some really amazing opportunities through the ACE office to study abroad, first in Peru, working with coffee, and then later I went back to Peru and Bolivia to do a seed related project, learning about climate change and potatoes. So all those things kind of came together and brought me to where I am. And I got some really cool experiences just through like the connections and opportunities that you get being at Morris and being really well connected to the community.
Thank you guys. Those are some really good answers. And yeah. So what did you guys do after you graduated? How did your kind of post-graduation experience start leading you to where you are now? Yeah. Natalie, I guess if you want to go in the same order as the first question again.
Sure. So right after college, I moved to Denmark. I got a Fulbright to do it. It kind of built on the work that I did in Bolivia. When I was there, I met a researcher and had this experience. Have you ever met someone and been like, oh, I want to do what you do? So like, that's kind of the experience I had. And so I was able to get a Fulbright to go to Denmark and work with him. So that's where he was from. And that was, I was studying amaranth, and it kind of accidentally turned into grad school, just due to some like immigration hangups. So I kind of had to enroll in grad school to stay in the country. So that's what happened. So I spent 2 years in Denmark, doing a master's degree originally in agricultural development, and then switching to agriculture. I felt like I needed more technical background. And I worked with amaranth in dryland farming systems mostly in Mexico. And then I also played this really cool role where the lab that I was working in was breeding all of these crops, kind of trying to diversify Denmark's food system. But none of that was like working with farmers yet. It was all being done in a lab. And so they were creating some initial collaborations with farmers to actually test these crops on their farms and working with chefs. And I sort of ended up becoming the liaison for that project. So I got to work with the farmers and actually like work on people's farms a couple of days a week to figure out like what was going wrong, what was going well. And then I also got to work with chefs all over to try to like convince them to actually include these crops in their restaurants. And that was a very extension-like role, I guess, just kind of being this connector person, like being able to be in the fields and get my hands dirty, but also being involved in the research. And so I loved it. And when I decided to come home, I applied for the first job that I could with extension. And it was not my dream job. It was working with pesticide safety. But I kind of felt like I was really young and I had never had a real job, and I wanted to get my foot in the door. So that's what I did. And then a couple of years later, this opportunity came up to work as like the local foods person in extension. And so that's how I got there.
After I graduated, I did a bunch of years where I would work the summers on different farms. And then I would work the sort of off seasons at a lovely little gift shop in the Twin Cities called Ingebrigtsen's Scandinavian gift store. And worked for the very first year that I graduated. My sister had also had vegetable experience. And so we joined an incubator farm program. So it was a space where There were, I think, 4 beginning farmers on that land. And it was, low cost access to land and some sort of like, the idea was that there would be co-marketing and sharing of tools and sharing of sort of like big processing, or not processing equipment, but like they were going to till everything for us basically. So some of that overhead of big equipment or big logistics were supposed to be taken care of as a group. That first year was great learning experience, learned a lot. All of our vegetables died. But the most important thing was that my sister and I, we went into it and we said, the most important thing is that our relationship stays good. So we still get along great. And the goal is that we will get to farm together again. But that experience really, I'd worked in vegetables for, I think, 4 seasons at that point on various small scales. And that experience really drove home the point of like, oh, veggie farming is hard to do in a way that is sustainable. There's lots of people out there who are doing an amazing job at taking care of their soil and growing really beautiful vegetables in a way that's not just extractive. But my sister and I had that experience on this piece of land that was just, the incubator farm was called the Sandbox Center because it was on pure sand. And so it was a piece of land that just really needed some animal impacts. It needed animals, it needed perennials, it needed some really intensive life brought back to the soil. So my sister, after that year, detoured off into nonprofit management world and building some more just like standard job skills. And I went off to work for a farm that was doing perennials, mostly apples, but all sorts of fruit, starting with strawberries and ending with apples. And then they had pigs and sheep and ducks and chickens. So wanting to learn about perennial agriculture, learned that I did not want to grow fruit trees because it's a lot of tractor time, even if you're doing it organically. And also, I am really bad at putting a ladder in an apple tree and climbing up and being in the spot I want to be. So it was not a fun puzzle, even though I thought it would be. So that was a great learning experience. I fell in love with animals, fell out of love with the idea of trees as primary crops. And then I spent a season working for 2 different lambing operations. If anybody knows Bennett Smith, he was almost graduated by the time I started Morris. So most of you probably don't. But I got to work for his parents for a 6-week lambing stint, and then went to work at a farm in western Wisconsin, doing lambing on pasture. And by that point, I was just absolutely in love with sheep. And so then the next season, I ended up on another incubator farm down in Spring Grove, Minnesota. And that's where I was for the last 3 years, growing a flock of sheep. And that was a really much better experience in terms of incubator farms. And now that was a 3-year program. So now I'm on a leased piece of property. And then have continued to, starting up farming takes a substantial amount of capital. I am very privileged that I got scholarships and my parents were able to help me with my education expenses. And so I don't have student loans, which has really allowed me to take advantage of opportunities that I wouldn't have been able to otherwise. So I want to recognize that I am where I am in part because I don't have student loans. Where was I going with that? Oh, but I've also always needed to have jobs while farming. So I got this really great job opportunity 2 years ago to work for this really cool energy nonprofit in Decorah. They're pioneering a model. They're 10 years old, the Winneshiek Energy District. And the idea is that they want an energy district in every single county. So they're following the soil water conservation district model of the energy districts in every county are there to provide technical assistance and help to people who want to improve their energy efficiency. And also the energy districts advocate for policies and make sure that the utilities aren't able to just increase rates whenever they want, sort of acting as a consumer advocate. And so getting to pair my original love of energy with my love of agriculture it's been a really fun fun mix to be able to 3 days a week, leave the farm, go talk to people, do big picture thinking, and then come back and do landscape level thinking at the farm.
You both have had some amazing experiences after college. Wow, mine's a little shorter. So after I graduated in 2014, I was an intern at the West Central Research and Outreach Center. And I was a dairy intern. So I worked with Dr. Brad Hines. He's a professor who works at the West Central Research and Outreach Center, or WCRLC, as I'll refer to it now on. And he, yes, he's a professor. He's actually through the College of Food, Ag, and Natural Resource Sciences in St. Paul, but he lives and works in Morris. So I took an internship with Brad and really built a super strong connection with Brad. I worked with him for a while past my internship as well. And at the WCRLC, a renewable energy position came open in 2014, the end of 2014, and I applied for the job and I got it. So I worked in renewable energy at the Rock for three years, and I was in charge of a project where I would go out and collect energy use data, so electrical energy use and thermal, so fuel use from commercial swine farms, and kind of modeled some clean energy alternatives for those swine farms. So I worked on that project for 3 years. This whole time I was still working part-time for Brad on the dairy. And Brad finally convinced me to go to grad school with him as my supervisor in 2017. So I went to grad school down in St. Paul starting in 2017. I actually still lived in Morris and commuted from Morris to St. Paul for classes. I also took a lot of classes online, so that was nice. And I went for animal science, and I defended my master's degree in 2000, well, right before COVID. It was 2019, right? 2020, March 2020, I defended my master's degree. And Brad actually had a grant already submitted and it was accepted. And in his grant, he wrote on kind of an assistant researcher position in his grant for me because he knew that he wanted to keep me on as his one of his researchers. So I was very fortunate that he and I kind of built this connection, and he liked me so much and wanted to keep me around. So I started working, online, working from home once COVID hit. And then I started actually going in to work back in, I think, August 2020. So I've been working for Brad as his assistant researcher in the dairy at the WCRLC since then. So it's been great.
It sounds like you guys have had a variety of different experiences, and it's maybe not always a linear pathway. Like you find something on accident. So given everything you've accomplished, do you have an idea of where you'd like to go next, whether that's in food systems or not? Oh, and we can do the reverse order again this time.
Okay. So being that my husband is part owner of a farm here in Morris, and I've fallen in love with Morris. I never thought I was going to be in Morris the rest of my life, but I'm going to be in Morris the rest of my life, and I'm okay with it. It's an awesome town. So I'll be here, and I'm really hoping that I can continue to work at the West Central Research and Outreach Center. I always have loved research, conducting research projects. I think it's really amazing when you do a study and you figure out at the end if whatever you're trying to figure out works or didn't work. Both outcomes are important, I think. And Brad, my supervisor, kind of lets me come up with studies that I want to do as well, which is really cool. So I've always enjoyed that, and I would love to continue to work for Brad. My position is funded through grant money. So Brad or myself, we have to continue to write grants and write me in as working on the grant so that basically I can stay here and keep getting paid to do this research. So he is quite well known in the dairy science industry, and he has gotten millions of dollars in grants. I'm not really concerned that he's not going to be able to find me grant money for me, but maybe someday if he starts slacking on his grant writing. No. So yeah, that's what I'm planning on doing for the foreseeable future.
And I am in love with sheep, so I would like to keep raising sheep. I'm looking for more permanent land access because part of the reason that I love farming is really thinking about sort of improving the ecosystem with the help of the sheep. So I'd really like permanent land that I can devote lots of time and energy and resources towards planting some trees and making a more diverse pasture and measuring soil carbon over time and making sure that the sheep are doing a good job and not depleting soil. I also really like my job at the energy district. I really like working with the AmeriCorps members. It's fun to sort of help people think about who they are and who they want to be every year. You get a new group and get to do it all again, which is great. I would really like this area of Southeast Minnesota. Highly recommend if you guys have never been down here, make a trip in summer. I have 12 sheep at the moment, and I would like to have between 40 and 60. So that's my big farm goal.
I'm in a similar position. I'm like really happy with what I'm doing. I kind of want to keep doing what I'm doing. I realized at the beginning I didn't really explain what extension is, so I might just quick do that right now, since I think it's a cool organization that a lot of you should know about and maybe think you might want to think about as a career path. So extension is part of the University of Minnesota, but rather than working with students, we work with the public. So we like connect the university to public needs. That's kind of the idea. And the really cool thing about a lot of positions within extension is that they're totally adaptable. So you kind of get hired and they're like, all right, welcome to extension, like go figure it out. Which can maybe be intimidating at first, but it's really nice in that you're able to adapt your programs to community needs. And so it can kind of shift and change as you change, or like the world around you changes. So I guess like right now, my programs are focused on climate change, adaptation, and land access. And so I'm really grateful to like be in this space where I can continue to kind of see what happens and what farmers need and adapt programs to that going forward. I feel pretty lucky that I am like in this position where I have some security to do that. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you guys for your answers. That is kind of the end of like our prepared questions. So if any audience members want to put questions in the chat or turn their camera on and ask questions, we can go ahead and ask some of those questions. I have a question. Yeah, Heidi, have you done any work with CSAs, and could you kind of like talk about those a little bit if you have any like experience with those? I think some graduating students might be interested in those kinds of, or hearing about those options.
Yeah. So I worked for one farm that was not doing CSA at the moment, but they are now. So CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture. The most common way that people run CSAs is you sign up. You as a consumer say, hey, I love this vegetable farm. I'm going to pay them upfront for the entire season of vegetables, and then they will every week or every other week pack me a box of whatever vegetables they have that week, and then I'll pick it up or they'll deliver it, some form of that. It's a really fun way of getting vegetables if you are someone who likes to cook. because you get a mix and you have to figure out what to do with it, and you have to eat it all in a week because there's more coming. There are people who are experimenting with meat CSAs or partnering with meat producers who are partnering with veggie producers to do sort of more like whole diet CSAs, or at least add-ons of meat to their CSAs. There's also down in Decorah, it is more common for the farmers to do farmers market CSAs. So you say, I really love Canoe Creek produce. I'm going to pay them $200 at the beginning of the season, and they're going to give me $220 credit. And then I just show up at their farmers market booth, and I point out all the things I want, and they subtract it from my balance. CSAs are great if you are a beginning farmer. Starting with CSAs is very overwhelming. If you are doing your first season of veggies or your first couple seasons of veggies, I would recommend selling at a farmer's market instead. If you're going to have a robust CSA, you need to be able to produce things on a schedule. You need to know, am I going to have enough for week 1? Am I going to have enough for week 5? Am I going to have enough for week 16? And so it's very helpful to know that you're going to have money at the beginning of the season to start. That's the biggest benefit of CSAs to the farmer. Also that they know that their produce will go out and be enjoyed by the world is also very nice. But if you, so start looking at sort of more of that farmer's market CSA model, if you're just getting started, taking off some of the pressure of like, oh, all my tomatoes died and now all my CSA customers are pissed. If you're doing farmer's market style, then it's not as much pressure.
Can I just add something?
Yeah.
That was great. I think also like the really successful CSAs can look really intimidating. They have like 300 customers. Like all of those people started out, the vast majority of them having like a 10-person CSA with like their closest friends and family members who would forgive them if things maybe didn't go right every week. Or they spent a long time working on other farms and learning from other farmers. But I think if you're thinking about doing that, starting really small is a really good way to kind of figure it out.
Adding on that, going to work for other people is a really great experience. Highly, highly recommend. Never, ever take a full season unpaid internship. There are farms out there who say like, oh, you're going to get such a great educational experience that we are paying you in education. Don't do it. I have never heard of a single person who has felt like they got their value. And as a potential future farmer, you need to be working for a business that can afford to pay their workers. Because if they're relying on free help, they're not actually a sustainable, well-functioning business. And you're going to learn more working from somewhere that can pay its employees.
Thank you. That's good advice to take on in regards to like working on farms. Another question that I got sent in the chat. So some of you guys have worked in renewable energy and agriculture. Can you talk a little bit about like the intersections between the two? Like what intersections you've noticed? Is there, are there other things that you have seen connecting them?
I can take this for now. Yeah, so like I said, we did a lot of research on solar at the WCRC. We have solar, we have wind, we have solar thermal, we have a lot of different renewable systems and energy alternative systems. And this new term popped up when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my master's degree, and it's called Agrovoltaics, which is the combination of agriculture and solar PV. It's really starting to grow in Europe. Farmers are putting up solar panels that are tall enough to fit a combine under, which is pretty impressive. Just Google agrivoltaics and a lot of cool pictures will pop up on Google. So it was a completely new term to me when I was trying to figure out what to do for my thesis. So that's one thing that we're looking at at the Rock is agrovoltaic. So how can you take land that is only being used for agriculture, whether it's crops or grazing, or maybe you have like a cattle feedlot, and how can you also turn it into a dual purpose type of landscape? So for us, we had the solar panels, and we also had cows under the solar panels grazing. For a feedlot, maybe they could have solar panels over their feedlot, which provides shade for their cattle, and then their cattle would eat more, and they would just be better off, more comfortable, lower body temperatures. We're also looking at kind of starting on a small scale, like what they're doing in Europe with farming under solar panels. So my supervisor wrote another large grant that we're hoping is going to get funded, and we will be installing solar panels and then also trying out different crops under the solar panels. He purchased a Monarch tractor, which is an electric tractor made out in California. So we're hoping to use this tractor under the solar panels to farm. So yeah, I would encourage you to look up, if you're interested in agriculture, renewable energy, look up agrovoltaics, and you will learn quite a bit of information.
I would say I am always, well, I would in the off-farm job at the Winneshiek Energy District, we end up talking about farming a lot. I think because, you know, solar and wind, to make a big impact with solar, you need a lot of land. And so then you're working with landowners, and most of those folks are farming, and you're dealing with sort of the politics, especially in Iowa, of we grow corn because we feed the world, but also because ethanol. And there's this very strong idea that if you put land into solar panels, you're taking it out of production. And so we have a lot of conversations about, should you say agrovoltaics was the term?
Yes, agrivoltaics, yes.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot, and without any data to back it up, but my executive director is always like, Iowa cattlemen are a thing, and what if we just put cows under the panel? So that's exciting that there's research in Minnesota, and I'll have to send him your way. So yeah, we end up talking about it a lot. Our energy planner does a lot of farm energy audits. They're running big equipment, so they have potential for really big savings. And there are the Natural Resource Conservation Service, NRCS, runs special grant programs for on-farm energy efficiency. And so we end up doing a lot of work with farmers that way. And there's just all the things go together of energy efficiency and caring about clean energy and caring about clean water, and it just all sort of wraps in together. My executive director is also a farmer. He raises Christmas trees and sheep and cattle. And so then we end up talking about sheep and then dive rabbit hole down into policy things, which is always really fun.
Heidi, one thing that I just thought of maybe you could look into is, you know, if you're driving and you see these huge solar systems along the highway, they always have a fence around them. And there's a lot of people talking about grazing sheep or goats in these fenced in solar systems. I don't know if you have any around you, but that could maybe be a way for you to graze sheep and graze them possibly for free under there. So yeah. I mean, the maintenance of that is large. I mean, they have to mow and stuff under the solar panels and maintain that whole area. So why not just throw a flock of sheep under there? That's something to think about.
I hear of a new one. I think, where is that? And I go look it up on a map. So far, none close enough to me, but fingers crossed.
See that Sherry Green has raised her hand. So Sherry, if you would like to, thank you for waiting patiently, but if you'd like to ask your question.
Yeah, thanks. This first is such a joy, and especially to see Natalie and Heidi, whom I haven't seen in a while and love hearing from. So this is really, really fun. And if my camera had been on the whole time, you'd have seen me grinning and nodding my head constantly. So this is really nice. So trying to think, I've got so many things I'd like to bring up, but one of the things is that, well, first I have to say, Natalie, I was researching a problem I was having in my garden last summer, and you were the author of the article that solved it. So thank you for that. That just made my day. And Heidi, I did not know you were working in Decorah, or it had, if I knew it, it had slipped my mind. But so I get down to Decorah, well, every year except because of COVID for the Seed Savers Exchange annual meeting. So when that's going again, if you're still there, I'm gonna have to find you. So, but one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is that it's clear to me that your paths, and this applies to you, Kirsten, as well, there's a combination of serendipity and planning. So I know you would not have done some of the things you've been able to do without some really serious planning, and all three of you made that really clear. I mean, Natalie, you're going after the extension position about pesticide training when that was not really what you wanted to do. That was a strategic move in many ways, but there's also serendipity, that things come your way, they kind of happen by and you grab the opportunities. So with that in mind, this combination of serendipity and planning, what advice would you give to first-year students at Morris, especially those who have real interest in agriculture, but not necessarily any background, not farm kids, who really are drawn in that direction? They aren't quite sure where yet, which form it's going to take, but looking back at your own experience, what advice would you give?
That's a great question. I guess I'll take a stab at it. I think one thing that I learned pretty early on in Morris was just don't be afraid to cold call people. I remember I was writing a paper for a class project about diatoms, which are they're basically algae. I won't go into that. There was this person who kept coming up in publications, and I called him, which was in retrospect, kind of a weird thing to do. But I was like, hey, I'm reading your papers, and there are these things that I'm not understanding, and I want to talk more. And he just offered me a job and took me under his wing and was this amazing mentor to me. And the same thing, when I moved to Denmark, I met this guy randomly, and then I just called him and was like, hey, can I just come live in Denmark and work with you? So I think that's one thing. And also, Heidi, I think you gave some good examples of this, but I think do as many things as you can with the understanding that you're going to figure out what you love to do, but you're also going to figure out what you don't love to do. I think there are a lot of things that I started, a lot of paths I started down, thinking that was going to be how I'd spent my life. And I realized that it wasn't how I wanted to spend my life. So yeah. And also just I think especially for folks who are really biology majors who are really focusing on research, that's awesome. But often your communication and community building skills are equally important in terms of the opportunities that those will open. So yeah, I guess don't limit yourself. Just try everything and call people, and don't be afraid of getting rejected.
Yeah, I can agree with that 100%, Natalie. I was writing a paper at some point in college, I can't remember when, about the reintroduction of peregrine falcons in the United States. And I emailed the guy that was in charge of it, and he emailed me back, and we talked, and it was amazing. So yeah, just don't be afraid to reach out to people. I'm not a very outgoing person, but I just did these things and it led me to great places. I was an intern with a professor at UMM looking at salamander research, and I interned with her one summer, and then that led me to a part-time position with the DNR for a summer. So I also volunteered with the DNR after that, and just wanted to get my foot in the door. And exactly what Natalie said and Heidi said, just volunteer, try new things. You'll figure out what you like and what you don't like, and that's both of those things are very important. So I recommend volunteering, getting new experiences, and it also looks great on a resume for further down the line.
Yeah, the things that came to mind, Natalie talking about communication skills and community skills, like I think all of that is, you'll never regret having built communication skills or community skills, because it ties into everything. I'd say my other big piece of advice, going back to sort of this is top of my mind because two of my AmeriCorps members were just talking about their student loans, and how completely horrible they are. So thinking about how can you build sort of financial skills, and who at Morris is there to help with figuring out sort of like, do you have loans you can pay interest on, and are there ways to get great experiences? I did National Student Exchange instead of study abroad, because I went to the financial aid office and they said, oh, great, you can take out $7,000 of loans and do that study abroad program. And I thought, no, not worth it. Not saying that study abroad is not worth it, but just thinking about what are the experiences that you can get and get paid for them, and what are the volunteering opportunities that you can do locally to figure out what you're interested in. So I think financial skills and watch out for loans is what I would add to what has already been said.
Okay, there's one more question in the chat that will probably be our last question because we only have 10 minutes left. But the last one, it is, how would you go about searching for a farm to find work on, or do you have recommendations of where to find work around the Morris area?
The one that comes immediately to mind is Prairie Drifter Farm in Litchfield. Is that right, Natalie? I have only ever heard absolutely amazing things about working at Prairie Drifter. Easy Bean in Milan, I've heard good things about working there. If you're interested in livestock, who are the livestock people with the cattle? Moonstone Farm. Have heard mixed things. Some years it's really great, some years they're busy and it gets a little hectic. Yeah, those are the ones that immediately come to mind. ATRA, which I don't remember what that stands for, but ATTRA, they run a listserv. The Midwest, nope, I don't know, MISA, I don't know what any of these stand for, runs a couple of listservs through the U of M Twin Cities. The main one is called Sustag, and you can either send like, I'm interested in looking for work, or people will post their jobs there. As you're looking for opportunities, don't be afraid to ask them for references and see what their previous interns say. If it's your very first season and you just want a taste, woofing can be a really great opportunity if you just want to try out a couple of different farms. But again, make sure you're asking for references, make sure you're reading the reviews on those farms, because some of them are great and some of them are not. If anybody wants to come down to this neck of the woods, I got more ideas for you. Or if anyone's really excited about sheep, let me know and I can give you specific recommendations.
Yeah, I would just add a couple. I think Moses has a good job board. Like Heidi said, Prairie Drifter is amazing. I know that they're hiring this season, and Loon Organics is right next to them. And a lot of Morris people have worked at both of those farms. I would start looking now people like want to start filling positions now. So even if you can't start till this summer, start looking. And I cannot echo enough what Heidi said about just like kind of doing some research about the places that you're going, especially if you're woofing. I have had some very negative woofing experiences, but also some very positive ones. So yeah, start looking now, and definitely, like Heidi said, ask them for references. But those couple of vegetable farms right around Morris are all really great places if you are looking for vegetable farms.
The WCROC hires interns every summer. I don't know if you all are will be graduating and looking for a permanent job, or if you are still looking for an internship. Even after I graduated, I went into an internship, so I think that's okay to do too. If you're interested in being a dairy intern, you can email me, and I think we have 1 or 2 positions open still this summer, I believe. And then, yeah, I would say don't be afraid to just reach out, even if a farm might not have anything posted for a job opening or an internship. It doesn't hurt to just reach out and ask.
Yeah, can you guys explain what woofing is real quick for those of us who don't know anything about farms?
Yeah, Woofing stands for Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. And it's a work trade. It's the only time I recommend or that I condone not getting paid, because you work about 4 to 5 hours a day. You have weekends off, and you're basically working for room and board. And the time limits range from like 2 weeks to a couple months on all sorts of different farms. You pay, I think you can look at the website without paying, but if you want contact details, then you pay some money. And then you can message with different farmers and see if it's a good fit for you.
Okay, thank you. And I think that's where we'll stop the recording for tonight. Thank you all for coming and attending and asking questions. And thank you to our panelists for coming and sharing their experiences. I will